How's it going?
Great. I'm sitting at the Oregon Hill Marina.
Looks beautiful. It's a beautiful day. You
Oh,
got the fire going and the water.
that's right. Yes, I wish it were real. I wish it were real. Today we're talking about servicing a listing, and it occurred to me that we're actually going to do this over a series of classes. There's going to be three. And the first one is, what do you do before you go on a listing appointment? That's today. Then there's well, what do you do when you're on a listing appointment? That's next week, unless something else comes up. And then there's the final, now you've gone on the appointment and they've signed the listing agreement, now what? And those are going to be the next three sections, right? And I may have been worded so it seemed like the third one was the first one, but the first one's the first one and the third one's the third one. Does that make any sense at all? I hope not. So there's a document which I'm going to share, just because I know if I don't give you guys something, people will complain, or just a class, they didn't even have a handout. What is it? If you guys could just verify that in fact that document opens.
Yeah, it works.
Oh, goody. So it looks something like this. Now, part of it is a overview, some of which we're going to have. Did I have this open? I'll have to find it. All right. So what do you do before you go on a listing appointment? Now, I've added in a few links, one of which is what we use on the team if you're going to have a listing. And it says preparing for a listing appointment. Hey, that sounds kind of like what we're talking about. And it starts with the transaction coordinator for the team. Because if you're going to want the seller to sign a listing agreement, and you do want them to sign the listing agreement, well, you need to have one, right? Which means you need to know zip forms sufficiently well that you could feel. I think I did that last week. And the transaction coordinator will prep it and fill out a lot of the information so that the goal when you go on the listing appointment is you take your phone, you add the zip forms mobile app, then because it's easier, I found this way on the computer, you put in the seller's names, all the information that you can, so there's less to do on the appointment. And then when you're sitting across from somebody and they say, yeah, we're ready to go, you can right then from your phone send them the listing agreement. Most people are signing them on their phones anyhow. Right. So this is, yeah, so that's what it is. And what you would do is you'd fill out a form telling us. Now, EXP has a seller toolkit. It's not bad, right? The Place partnership team has what I would consider a less assembly required, different kind of it's a more, I like it better. But there was an article I also put in for home sellers about what the NAR settlement means, which came from the National Association of Realtors. We're not getting asked about that a lot. I'll cover that more when we do the listing appointment. These next two are still on that topic. I'm not even sure we need to do this here, but in case sometimes someone says, what are you talking about? Court settlement? I don't know. All right, so what would you do before you go on the appointment? Now, in this article that I put together with a little help, I go through the different sections of what you would be doing once you are in the pre-listing stage. First, you'd be researching the property and the market. How would you do that? Well, starting point is you would go to the Realtor's Property Resource. Remember, minimum, what do you really need to know, right? You don't need to know everything. You don't need to know what a reverse exchange is, and you don't need to know everything. But you need to know how to use zip forms. You need to know how to use RPR. You need to know how to use your CRM if you're on the place team that's called Brivity. And you need to know how to use the multiple listing service. You don't need to know how to use SkySlope. You don't. The transaction coordinator knows how to use SkySlope, right? But you need to know this is one of those things you need to know. I have videos. I'm going to redo them again. But let's say we go to RPR and I'm going to pick a property that is, I don't know, this one, I think. Let me pick something. How about this beautiful active listing, right? Just for fun. Now what I'm just going to show you is what I would do is let's say this is the property that we're going to go on. And this one happens to be active. I picked it because, well, it's my listing. So I don't have to worry about agents saying, why did you show everybody my listing? Right? You know what I mean? So anyhow, what I would do at first is I would go ahead and run a CMA and I would do some research. Now, I'm sorry, I'm a little disjointed. Let's go back to this document. I should have started with this. This is a pre-listing lead sheet. And if you're old school, you can print them out and write on them with a stubby pencil. If you create a PDF and you load it into Google Drive and you use DocHub, it'll allow you to type on it. That's a free program. I have other videos on that sort of stuff. So these are some questions that you would want to ask at the beginning. So when somebody says, yeah, I got your postcard, I do want to know the value of my house, I am interested in selling it, when can you come over? Don't just hang up the phone, right? Don't just, I've actually had agents who said, I made an appointment for next week, but I didn't ask them their address. I don't know their address. Did you get their name? No, I didn't ask them their name either. I was so excited. Somebody said they wanted to sell their house. I was so excited, right? So slow down, right? Breathe, right? Ask them for their name and get the address of the property. And what's a good way in case we get disconnected that I can get back to you? Wonderful. If I were going to send you some information about the property or the process, what would be the best email? Okay, great. So these are some things we might want to know. At least we want to know their name, their email address, and a cell phone, right? At least. Are you already working with an agent? Now, you might think that's a strange question to ask somebody that has called me and said they want to sell their house. Sometimes they're already listed and it's approaching the end of its life, the listing. And they're already, looking for another log to jump on, whatever that means. Have you signed an agreement? Sometimes yes or no. Now, at this point, we might find out whether or not they have a valid listing agreement. And those of you that were in my class, when I talked about the listing agreement, remember that safety clause? That clause that says that 60 days afterwards, if anyone that we've negotiated with and we provided a written list, it buys the property, then wouldn't we want to know about that? If we were listing it at the end of its expiration? Yeah. Why are you moving? Where are you moving? How soon do you need to be there? What will happen if your home doesn't sell? What are you going to do? Are you in a corporate relocation program? Now, I wouldn't necessarily ask that unless it was unknown, right? If they say, well, we're going to be moving to Georgetown, Texas, because our daughter's having her first child and we want to be there. And, this does not sound like corporate relocation to me, right? If they say, well, we're moving to Georgetown, Texas, because Apple has told us to go there for that. Well, now that's corporate relocation. Why do we want to know that? Anybody know what the issue is here? This is what happens. You're farming an area. You're working an area. You're door knocking. You do open houses and you meet people. You get to meet homeowners. You like them. They like you. They say, hey, if we ever going to sell our house, we're going to call you. But Apple is relocating them to the Austin area. That's where Georgetown is. Apple has a corporate relocation company. Guess who picks who the listing agent is? The corporate relocation company. And they do this thing called a third party buyout where they'll just buy the house here in California. They'll just buy it and then give them the money so they can go buy a house in Texas. But they have to do what the corporate relocation company wants, which is probably not list with you. I'm just saying, right? You understand? And sometimes they have a right to request, we would like Emily to be our agent. But the corporate relocation company says, we already got somebody that we work with in that area. We'll be handling it. See you later. Right? We would like to know. Are you thinking about selling your home yourself? Sometimes they say yes. Or maybe, or we're thinking about it. Why then did they call you? Well, they're gathering data. They get 5 or 6 real estate agents to run CMAs and come over and tell them what they need to fix and tell them what the property's worth and tell them what they're likely to net. They're doing research before they list it themselves. On a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being extremely urgent, how motivated are you? You would circle it. And the disc profile, which is going to be things we'll talk about later in greater detail, refers to a personality assessment. Is the person a driver, an influencer, a supporter, or steady, or a compliant? And you can sometimes tell simply by the way people talk and the words they use. If you want to mess up an engineer, ask them how they feel about something. When you get a blank stare, rephrase the question and say, what do you think about something? Now you get an answer. You understand? You can sometimes tell by the words they use, right? How many of you are familiar with the disc profile? Some of you. EXP has a link. Place has a link to take a free profile. Which profile, the driver, which is results oriented, the influencer, which is outgoing, people oriented, the supportive style, which is not as outgoing, but people oriented, and the compliance style, the analytical style. If you didn't know when you went on the appointment which of these the decision maker was, which style would you prepare for? You have to prepare for one of the 4 styles. You don't know what you're dealing with. Which one would you pick?
Driver.
What? Driver?
Driver.
Any other?
Maybe more of S.
What?
The steady supporter.
Okay. Any other votes? The answer is the C.
Analytical.
The analytical. The answer, because you can't fake it or find it at the appointment. I'll tell you about I go on a listing appointment. The guy, we're sitting at the kitchen table. I'm doing my listing, presentation thing. He says, yeah, keep going. I just have to do it. So he gets up and he's in the kitchen, like cleaning stuff while I'm talking. And he's like, oh, no, keep going, keep going. And I slowed down at one point and he looked at me and he said, will you need a key tonight? He's a D, a high D. See, on the high D, you can ask them in advance. By the way, just so I get an understanding of where you're at in the process, do you plan on listing your property with me on Thursday night when I come there? Now, some of you may think that's kind of an aggressive question. I've had people say, yes. Why do you think I called you? I want you to come over and list the house. Well, do you feel different when you know that's the appointment rather than the one that says we're interviewing 6 other agents? This is your slot, your shot at it. So now the high D doesn't want to see all of the graphs and charts and analytical information. So don't show it to them. The I doesn't care about that either. The S doesn't care about it as much as the C is the one who cares about that. And when you have graphs and charts and things like that, they like it. If it's not an analyzer, just don't show it to them. The D only wants to know, is the arrow going up a good or a bad thing? Right? That's their level of data, orientation. Good or bad if it goes up. Oh, bad. Oh, okay, now I understand. Right? The C wants to see the spreadsheet. Now, does that make sense to everybody? Right? But while we're talking, if we're in attune to this, we can pick up, it changes the language we use. Right? We'll talk about that later in mirror and matching. Tell me a little bit about your house. God, don't skip this. And I usually add, tell me any renovations or improvements you've made. One of my Padawans was doing an open house. She met a local seller, a neighbor who wanted to sell the house. He was interviewing 4 or 5 other agents at the time. She got a listing appointment with him. She told him she was bringing me, and she and I were going to split up the work. She was going to do the comparative market analysis on the home. My job was to go on the appointment and get the guy to sign the listing agreement. Right? So she went online, she looked at the property, found it, his name, 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,300 square foot house. So she runs a CMA. We show up. It's a 5-bedroom, 3-bath house at about 2,800 square feet. Right? They did some work, apparently without permits, because it doesn't reflect in the record. So how valuable was our 3-2? Worthless. By the way, what I said to the guy, once I realized it, he didn't know that we had brought, a stupid CMA. So what I said to him is, professionals generally don't just come and give you a number, right? If you had hired an appraiser, the appraiser would come and look at your house first, and then the appraiser would refine their research and they would come up with the proper number. I could tell this guy, by the way, was an analytical style. And I said, unlike most of the real estate agents, I use a 2-step approach, where first I want to actually see your house and talk to you about it and find out all the things you do. And then I'm going to go and do research and give you a number. That's all BS, by the way, right? The only reason I'm doing it in 2 steps is because we didn't have a CMA on the first step. But I had RPR's mobile app on my phone, and while he was talking, I pull it up and it geographically, orients to where you are. I see that there's a house like right next door that was a 3-2 that was improved to a 5-3 without permits. Just right there. And so while we're talking, I'm telling him it's worth 1.2. It sold, by the way, for a 1.22. But you want them to describe the house. Do not.
Michael,
Yeah.
what how did you know that the next door neighbor had a 5-3 if it was unpermitted in RPR?
Because it had sold through the MLS.
Oh, okay.
See, this
Thank
is a
you.
different question, but if we list it, how do we list it? Do we list it as a 3-2, what the tax records say, or do we list it as a 5-3? I've been asked this question
5-3.
by agents many times, and the answer is 5-3. When you walk through the house, how many bedrooms do you see? Well, there's 5. How many bathrooms? Well, there's 3. Put that down, right? And so how did I know that it was without permits? Because I could see in RPR that it was a 5-3, but the tax record said 3-2. Same thing as this one. Yeah, but I might be more nimble than you in a situation like this. Find out in advance. Tell them to describe the house. You'll be amazed how many times they're talking about a house that doesn't sound like the one that you find in the tax records. How long have you owned the house? How big is the house? Bedrooms, stories, bathrooms? Done any updates or work on the house? Does it have a pool? To rate your home on a scale of 1 to 10, what would make it a 10? Do you have a loan? Now, again, we would like to know that for purposes. One of the things that you need to know how to do on a listing appointment is to use one of the apps that calculates the net sheet. the more we can do before we're in the listing appointment, the less we have to do in the listing appointment. This is easier, right? Because if you're new, you'll be nervous and scared, and you don't want to have to do more thinking than you have to. How much do you think your house is worth? I've told people, I ask them sometimes, have you been paying attention? You get the little postcards and flyers from real estate agents. Yeah. So have you been paying attention to what's happening with values in your neighborhood? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Do you have an idea what your house is like to sell for? Now, sometimes they'll say, oh, we're not going to tell you. No, we want you to tell us. Okay. All right. Want to play that game? Sometimes they'll just say a number. I've had people just say, I want 1.6. Okay. Good to know. Because now when I'm running a CMA, one of my things is this possibly worth 1.6? How much do you want to list the house for? Right? They might say, well, it's the same. We'll talk about that in the listing appointment. What price won't you go below? Sometimes they won't tell you, but many times they will. Are you up to date on payments and everything? Are you the sole owner? What are the things you have to check? One of my first listings in the San Jose area when I moved there was I had somebody cut my hair, and she asked me what I did for a living, and I admitted that I was a real estate agent. I know, I admitted it. And it turns out she had a duplex that she wanted to sell. And when it came time to the listing, I'm looking at the records, and the name that is there is not her name. It is obviously not her name. And so it was, who's this? Right. Oh, that's my brother. Is he going to sign? He'll sign everything. Okay. All right. But you might want to ask that question. If not, who else is on the title? Do you have other real estate? How did you hear about our team? If you want, how are the 3 things you expect from a realtor? You don't have to do all of these. But if you were going to give them the full Monty, this would be it. Are you setting other appointments? Many agents are scared to ask that because they're thinking, oh, maybe they aren't thinking of talking to anyone else. And if I bring it up, then they'll think about it. And then they either are or they aren't. Right? They either are or they aren't. So, and then you could write some other notes. And if you're wondering, you could save this as a Google document. You can make it a PDF and type on it. You could create a Google form from it. I don't care, but you get the idea. We want to ask questions before we show up. See, then what that allows us to do is to run a CMA. Now, we're not going to send it to them in our pre-listing stuff. Right, you don't do that. You might send them general information about what's going on in the real estate market. Well, how would we do that? Well, this is the California Association of Realtors shareable reports. Here's one that's called a seller's guide. Oh. And I happen to know, it's going to take a second, it'll load. Come on. And the property that I'm using as my example is in Alameda County, and specifically it's in Union City. And here's a PDF, which is more of a letter type, and this is something that you could put into something like a PNG image. But see that? That was hard. So if I want to communicate market stuff, well, how about this? Right? Now, in my document, and then there's some questions. In my document, I go through the different stages. Some of this I've already covered. Researching the property, you're going to want to look at the public records. Now, if we go to RPR, it's going to handle most of these questions, right? So here's the facts about the property. Here's the listing features, because it's in the MLS. If it's not in the MLS, that's fine. It tells you the legal description. It tells you the schools. It tells you the information about the owner. It gives you the history of the property, any previous listings. It'll show you when a mortgage was taken out. Now, we don't know exactly what the outstanding balance is, but with an amortization calculator, if we knew that somebody borrowed $350,000 in 2021, first of all, we could ask artificial intelligence and it would do this for us. Because it knows what interest rates were like in 2021, it knows amortization schedules, and we could say, assuming that although it's a 30-year fixed rate loan and everything was paid on time, what is the outstanding balance? And it would give you a guess. But the owner may know. If we want to see what the tax records are, we would click on that. And if we wanted to see if it's ever been in pre-foreclosure, it may have been, but a long time ago. Right, and then here's past activity, and this is the estimated value over time. We could do it for a couple of years. All of that is right there. So what I've done is I usually create a Google folder and I can put pre-listing stuff in it, like this stuff. Now, if you want, you can print some of it out and take it with you, right, if you want. Right, and put it in a little folder and hand it to them. I oftentimes do that, but when I'm sharing stuff in advance, I usually just create a Google folder and upload it. It's also useful because they can upload things to the folder too. They say, well, we have invoices from all the contractors that we've paid. Great, I mean, put it in the folder. Right, we have floor plans, put it in the folder. Right, then I have access to it and we're not emailing, you get the idea. School rankings. Now, you're going to see that this system, RPR, allows you, the seller's net is a lot easier to do on the phone app, but you could create a report which includes market activity. And there's a bunch of other ones, neighborhoods and things like that. Again, we don't do the CMA really at this point, but we might give them market information. Easy, easy, easy to do. Any questions so far? And I have links on how do I create a CMA and how to take training, and I have questions. The marketing plan we're going to talk about. Preparing for your listing presentation. If you're on the place team, we're going to be going through the place listing presentation. There's a certification that you can get. We're going to give you some material for pre-listings and all of that sort of stuff. Going to, because we're nice. Right. Something like that. All right. So you do a CMA. About the CMA, in fact, I could use this one, right? I could use this one. Notice this is a condominium. Now, the thing about condominiums and tract homes is that there's often a standard square footage, 1286. Well, what are the things you're going to find when you do a CMA? And this is what I always do. What you're watching is in real time. What I do, it only takes me a couple of minutes, but I've had a lot more practice. But I go into the form and let's say I was just going to remove all the comps, right? Because I've already gone through all this. So here's the subject property right there. And what I would do is draw a shape, and things that are within a quarter of a mile are more important, particularly if we're talking about a complex. Because they're obviously not in the same condominium complex. I have a mile away. So I'm looking for just the things that are in this complex. And it said they didn't find any. Well, it's terrible. So I go back to modify and I say, well, how about in the last 6 months? Anything in that area, and I'll take anything, right? Anything. Active, I'm just active, sold, under contract, anything, give it to me. And this has been one of the problems. That seems wrong. Are you letting me down? All right. Notice how far back I had to go. Now, so what that means is this is not a robust market. But what I'm looking at is it's a 1982 2.2, 1286 square feet. So I'm scrolling down looking for another 1286 square feet. Notice there isn't one. This model, I went back a year and a half and this model hasn't sold. Now this happens. So what I did is I went into the MLS and and your MLS will act similar, but I go into the MLS. I'm going to copy the address because I'm lazy. And I'm going to go into the MLS and I'm going to do a search. And most of you are using matrix of some form. I'm going to look for something sold. I want it to be really close to this property within a quarter of a mile. And what I'm looking for is 1286 square feet, 24 of them. So this model has sold, just not in the last year and a half, and I'm going to look at results. Now, this is usually done based upon the date, but the last time it sold was back in this model, 2023. Now, why would I know that? What would an appraiser use a comp that old? No. But do I sound like I know about what's going on when I'm talking to the owner and I say, well, you know, part of the problem with doing the market analysis for your property, one of our challenges, I always try to say challenges instead of problem. It's a challenge for me to remind myself. But one of our challenges is there have been very few sales, and particularly of your model. The last time this model sold in this subdivision was back in 2023. And they got 570,000. By the way, could we determine what the average median price of a condominium in Union City was in 2023? Is that possible? Sure. ChatGPT knows the answer. Gemini knows the answer. The CAR reports know the answer. Your MLS knows the answer. RPR knows the answer. Right? Lots of people could tell you what the average condo sold for in 20. Can we now also look at what does the average condo sell for in Union City today? Sure, all of those programs would tell you that. Could we factor the difference? Since 2023, the market has gone up by 10, 20%. Right? You understand this isn't an appraisal, but it's a reality check. Are there any Angela, if you could look and see if there's a question I need to answer, I would be forever grateful. All right. I'm sure they all demand my attention, but just in case.
Yeah, right now Audra just asked
Okay.
how to make a Google folder. We're just going to send her some information.
How do you
Other than that, I think we're good.
Is that the question?
Mhm.
You go to Google, you click on new, and you select folder. Everybody write that down. And now you have a folder. And then you share the folder with the clients and you make them editors so they can add stuff. If they delete something, don't trip about it. Google lets you go back in time. Google remembers everything forever. All right.
And Janice just asked, has anyone had much success with the EXP reload program?
Reload.
Relocation program.
Reload. So it doesn't hurt. It doesn't hurt to go through the reload program. However, if you're not an experienced agent who sold real estate for a while, you will never get a lead. And the reason you don't get a lead is that the certification only puts your profile on the website, but who chooses the listing agent in a relocation? And the answer is it's the relocation company. And the relocation company does not give listings in particular or buyers to agents who have never sold a house. They just don't see why they should, so they don't. So is it valuable? Are there things you could do with the relocation that was more locally focused that doesn't involve the big third-party relocation companies? The answer is yes. But your first transaction will not be an EXP relocation. It won't be an REO one. It won't be any of those because they don't pick brand new agents. And they know your profile, how long you've been in real estate, and they have ways of checking whether or not you've sold anything. It's called Zillow. That's the truth. Didn't they tell you that in the certification? They usually do someplace. All right. What else are we doing? So that's enough about doing some research. That's not it. Market conditions, days on market, buyer's market, or a seller's market. How would we ever know that? That seems really complicated. I'm not going to change this. If we, by the way, just looked at what's going on in market trends here, we just click on this, just looked at all the little tabs. What's going to happen is this is going to load. And because the subject property is a condo townhouse, it's giving us, this is what that looks like. It's a seller's market. There's 1.55 months of inventory. What that means is if we stop selling houses today, stop listing houses, excuse me. If we stopped listing houses today, then it would take us 1.5 months. Now, I can tell that this isn't great information because we don't have very many condos that sold. And for those of you that are in the place group, you also have access to Area Pro, which allows us to prepare more sophisticated, that's called a TMO, a total market overview. And it has more data, more graphs and charts and things like that. And what you'll find, I don't necessarily have to go all the way to Union City, but there just aren't very many sales. So I have an Alameda County one I've created. You can create a bunch of them. And if it's something where there's a little more movement, like, oh, I don't know, here's Union City condos and townhomes. I've created one. And in the last 6 months, there are 6 active listings right now in Union City for condos and townhomes, average on the market 20 days. Mine's thrown that off a bit. 4 are pending, which means out of the 6, 4 are pending, which is almost 67%, but we're not dealing with a lot. In the last 6 months, there's been 14 sales, average 50 days on the market. That means 2.3 are selling. And notice the list to percentage of list price. People are getting just a teensy bit over list price. And it has more graphs and charts and things like that. And yes, you can make a PDF. And you could ask artificial intelligence questions. And you could make some changes. Now, you understand, if the people are analytical, they're going to really care about this. If they're high D's and high I's, they don't. But they're impressed that you know. I've heard most agents, if you're looking at the disc profile, in residential, they're what's called a DI. All right, if you were to just, they're outgoing people, but have enough drive to actually go to work. Right, there's some that are very outgoing, but you know, they don't do anything. And commercial real estate, it's an ID where you have people that are mostly results-oriented drivers, but they're friendly enough that people don't pepper spray them too often. Right, you know, so real estate agents tend to think, well, I don't care about those statistics. I find this all boring. Therefore, no one else does either. That's the mistake. Right? Just because you don't think it's important doesn't mean no one thinks it's important. Right? And if they're analytical, they think this is important. Any questions about that? All right, so you're going to want to do this. You ought to practice running some CMAs. Find houses in the area that you just practice. So that when they say that, you're not calling me up and saying, what do I do? I don't know how to do it. I can't find your video. Understanding the seller's motivation, some of that we've already gone through, right? These are some other kinds of questions too. Have you ever sold a home before? I've added that one here. What is your most important factor in choosing an agent? Are you in? So these are some other pre-appointments in the seller discovery call. I know I have you 2 lists. Preparing a pre-listing package. If you've got stuff about you, your bio, picture of your children, your dog, on vacation, whatever, stuff about EXP, place, stuff, right? Local market statistics, the CMA summary would be using the parts that's not, we think your home's gonna sell for this amount, but the rest of it. Information about the selling process. Where would you be able to get stuff like that? And the answer is the title companies have lots of stuff. Ask any of them. And they have stuff on for sellers and how escrow works, and they have all that kind of stuff. Marketing strategy, I have a marketing plan. We also have one in place. A sample listing agreement and disclosures. You can go and print samples. You just say print sample, makes a copy of it. So what kind of disclosures, we're going to do a class on that. But at the beginning, it would be a TDS and a SPQ, assuming they were a normal 1 to 4 unit residential seller. No one had died, and it wasn't an executor or trustee. Now, the reason I do that is because I would rather they read the listing agreement in advance and ask me any questions that they might have, rather than when I'm at the appointment, they say, well, we can't sign it now. We've never had a chance to read it. And we might have questions. And if you have trouble, if you're on my team and you're having trouble answering questions about the listing appointment, we usually don't get a lot, but if you make an appointment, then I'll be happy to talk to them. Frequently asked questions are, we're going to be putting, if you, what are the frequently asked questions when somebody's thinking about selling their house? I have samples of that. There's a questionnaire which you could have them fill out, which talks about some of the stuff. And you might, anyhow, we're going to help you put it together, right? We're going to provide you some templates. Pre-appointment, confirm. They sometimes forget. Check the MLS. This is a sad thing to say. Check the MLS before you go. See if it's an active listing with someone else before you drive there. Just right. Will all the decision makers be present? Well, that's important because they both have to be there to sign. Now, they're not signing in person, so technically the other person could sign, but what you don't want to do is to get in a situation where one of the 2 owners has been designated to be the front person that collects all the information, but the other one that's not there is going to look at the packets afterwards and make a decision. You could, anyhow, this is just some samples. We're going to make some, but you could do it digitally, because I'm lazy, or you could go and drop it off, right? And that would be, I've also provided a checklist for some things for the CMA. The pre-listing questionnaire already gave you one. This is another version of it if you like it. Some scripts for before you go, packet and presentation, some objections, and you might now a lot of these we're actually going to be doing when we're at the appointment. We're going to talk more about these. But sometimes you in the pre-listing conversations end up getting into this. Any questions so far?
Hi, Michael.
Hello.
It's Neil Singerman. Why, if the owner was a previous for sale by owner and their price on Zillow was ridiculous, you ask them what they're going to sell for and they're unrealistic, what happens next?
Well, it all comes down to motivation. Why are you selling your house at this time? One of the downsides of working with for sale by owners is that they often have insane ideas as to what their house is worth.
Absolutely.
Right. And they think, well, and usually it's reverse thinking. I need X amount of money to pay off my loan and to buy the manufactured home I want to move into. And in order for me to net that much money, I need to sell for this price and not pay a real estate agent. Now, that's not how buyers price properties. Buyers don't offer based upon what the seller wants or the seller needs or the seller says it's going to take for them to buy the next house. They do it based upon what other similar properties have sold for and what the competition is. And so you can explain that to them, right? Which, this makes sense. Plus, if they've been doing it for a while, reality might have, beat them about the head enough that they're realizing they just can't pick a number and expect somebody to pay it.
Yes.
So, but sometimes we can't save them. In the case that, for example, is it better to get the listing the first time or the second time? And sometimes it's the second time. Because there's real estate agents that will buy. So I'm on the listing appointment. You just told me what you think. You're the for sale by owner, what your home is worth, and I think it's high. And I say, absolutely, that sounds like a reasonable number to start with. Well, my company and I, we've sold quite a few properties in this area, more than that, and they weren't nearly as nice as yours. Now, what I'm doing, this is sometimes called buying the listing. So I'm going to get them to list it with me because I'm willing to go with the ridiculous price and they want to believe that that's possible. And then once I get the listing, I start to beat them down until they lower the price and it sells. I actually do this on a listing appointment when I see that disparity, and I would say, well, I have a dilemma. And the dilemma is related to I know that you listed your home for sale by owner at this amount. And I've been doing research. And the research seems to show a different amount. That's not my dilemma. You see, what my dilemma is that I have two choices right now as an agent. Number one, I could just lie to you. I could just lie and say, yeah, that's a great prize. I'm sure we can get it. And then I'll let you down later. Or option number two is I could level with you. And I could show you what's happening in the market and what's going on, what the reality is. But then you might not like that. And you'll go with another agent who's not as honest. So maybe you could help me out with this. What do you think I should do? Should I lie to you or should I level with you? What do you think I should do?
Be level.
Yeah, they always say that, but sometimes they don't want to answer the question.
They want the other one.
They want
Michael,
you.
I did have a lady that she knew that she's asking for a lot, but she also wanted to net the cost of what she put into the house. So she was firm on the price that she wanted, even though she knew that it was high, just because she wanted to net the cost.
Well, yeah, I want Disco to make a comeback and to be a size 32. I've told people this. People in hell want ice water. I understand you want to get all the money back, but there's this thing called the cost versus value report. Have you ever heard of that? Cost versus value? It's done
Cost
by a
versus
company
value.
called Cost versus value. It's done by a company called Henley Wood, which is a remodeling company.
Okay.
Now, if some of you are thinking, well, I don't know where that report is, Google it. You'll find their website, and I'm sure that most of you are already nodding right now because you have learned how to use RPR, right? And for some reason, I lost my RPR. So you've already learned how to use RPR, right? All of you? You already know about RPR. So let me go back to
Michael,
yeah.
I wanted to add something that this particular FSBO was listed by an agent who said, okay, I'll take it for that price. And we researched it, is about $700,000 over what it should sell for. And agent just bought the listing and then didn't sell it. Now they, for sale by owner, wants the same price.
Right, well, it's still the same, conversation.
Right.
So cost, what we're really talking about is the cost versus value analysis. Now, when we are looking at a listing in RPR, first of all, you could let's just try this. Cost versus value, 2025. See how this is hard to find, really hard to find. 2025 cost versus value guide for home remodelers. All of this really comes from the same one, and it has someplace there's a link to it. It's done by Hanley Wood. Let me just make this easy. I'm pretty sure. Here we go. Well, anyhow, there's a bunch of them. Here's the National Association of Realtors has given us a link. And so here is
Michael, are you sharing?
I'm sorry, thank you for mentioning. So now I'm sharing, right? So if you look for cost versus value, you're going to find it, but I was talking about RPR. So we go into RPR and we go over here to refine value. And then we say, okay, you want to include the cost of your improvements. Let's start with one. What have you done? Well, we upgraded we did a mid-range bathroom remodel. Okay, we'll put that in. When did you do it? Well, I did it back in 2019. All right. And we did it in February. And how much did you spend back in 2019 when you did your mid-range bathroom model? We spent $15,000. All right. Now, when we click on add improvement, this is going to throw my thing off. When we click on add improvement, what the cost versus value ratio shows us is that the cost doesn't translate into value exactly. See, one of the things is she's lived in the house and got to use the improvements. So when they study, you spend $15,000 on a mid-range bathroom remodel. Look at it, it's hung up. Over time, what it's going to show is how much, if any, that actually adds to the selling price of the property. And it's still spinning around. So you can go through each of the different things. There are very few things that when you do translate into 100% or more of what you cost into the value. Very few things. Painting is one of the ones that does, because it doesn't cost as much and it improves the saleability of the property. And it's just spinning around. So it is added as a result of that $7,125, not 15, because these aren't brand new improvements anymore, right? What else have you done? Well, you see where I'm going. What else have you done? So you could go through and do it. Now, a lot of these people are just not rational, and evidence is not important to them. But if somebody, but you need, and you can find the actual, you can download a PDF of the cost versus value, which you could take with them. They break it down by regions. So it's not like done for a particular city necessarily, but it's done for regions. But it gives you an idea. The fact that you spent $15,000 6 years ago does not mean you're going to get $15,000 back when you sell it today. That's not reasonable. Right. And where does this come from? This all comes from Hanley Wood cost versus value. That's where it comes from. And I'm not, what is cost? So some other people have been basically using it. I don't really see the main one, but here, let's just see if this guy is showing us the real report. So yeah, this is That's just an icon. We can find it. I usually spend some time at some point and find them. Even Home Depot has one. Others have them as well. But the easiest thing is just to use what's built into RPR. And some people are not reasonable. So then the question is, do you want to take the listing? My question would be, are you farming that geographic area? And if the answer is yes, think about it. Because you get to put up a for sale sign, you get to send out a just listed postcard, you get to do open houses, you could say it's my listing. Of course, the fact that it never sells is not a positive thing. But then sometimes the market picks up and the sellers comes down and some crazy person wants to buy it and they don't need an appraisal contingency. I actually say to people in this situation, I understand how you feel. You put this much in, you want to get that much out. I understand that most people feel exactly the same way you do. But what they find is that they need a loan. And the loan requires an appraisal. And the appraiser is going to just look at the facts of record. They don't really care about the owner's motivation. Right? They don't care. They just look at what have similar properties sold for in the area, and those facts of record that they're going to look at are the same ones I'm showing you here right now. And it's not going to, the chances are really good it will not appraise. Even, and I say it this way, I said, even if I could I mean convince someone to give you that price, it still won't appraise. It's not going to appraise. Now what? And if you want, why don't you hire an appraiser today? Hire an appraiser, have them come out and tell you what the house is worth. And then ask yourself, is that going to work for you? That's my feelings about that. Any other? There are some things for which there is no cure. All right. Other questions? Are you happy you got a handout? The scripts, a little interaction. You learned somebody, I bet some of you didn't know that RPR would do what I just showed you. I'll bet. There's at least one of you that didn't know. Okay.
Thank you so much.
So next time we meet, it's going to be what to do now that you're at the appointment. Right? Sounds good. All right. That's it. Talk to you later.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Hey,
Bye.
Michael, appreciate it.